Hearing that Aram decided to do the exact same thing. As they left, Mikmo figured she'd follow their lead. But before heading out, she checked if Yenlong was coming too. The girl shook her head, saying she wasn't tired and wanted to squeeze in a few more sets. Mika took off, warning her rival not to overdo it. And with that, Yenlong was all alone in the gym. In this quiet moment, her thoughts started drifting towards a certain someone, but she quickly told herself not to get ahead of herself. It was nothing weird, honest. She was just thinking about how much stronger Ju-hook's training was making her. Still, that guy was a complete anomaly. No normal person should be able to wipe out monsters like he does. She was also genuinely happy that he seemed to be getting stronger just by training with them. He was just plain incredible. Yenlong tried to recall why she became his student in the first place. Her goal had been to surpass him, but now she was convinced he was so insanely powerful that it was an impossible dream. She had to admit she was already struggling just to keep up with his training. There was no way she could ever beat him. So why was she still here? Her heart skipped a beat as she remembered him protecting her, solving all her problems without even breaking a sweat. Things weren't so clear-cut anymore. It felt like her entire life was starting to revolve around him. As that realization hit, her heart started hammering in her chest. Could this be pheromones? With her heart racing, she found herself missing him and imagining some very unconventional training sessions. There was no denying it, her thoughts had taken a nosedive into the gutter. And once those thoughts started, they weren't stopping. Maybe this would help. Her eyes fell on the towel he'd given her. This isn't weird, is it? Who cares anymore? She decided to just grab the towel to wash it and give it back to him. The idiot forgot it, so I guess I have to, she thought. Whoa, what is this smell? My heart's pounding and I feel all tingly. She glanced around. Nobody's looking right, so maybe just a tiny sniff. By the way, please help us hit 3,000 likes so we can bring you every single chapter of this story. Things are about to get interesting because Yenlong was just caught with her nose where it didn't belong. Seahawk had only come looking for the protagonist to ask for training, but now that he'd seen Yenlong's embarrassing secret, he had to be silenced. The punch she threw was meant to either knock him out cold or wipe his memory clean. It was a seriously uncalled for attack. The poor girl just couldn't believe she'd been caught in such a mortifying moment. She was so ashamed she actually burst into tears. Meanwhile, our hero was back in his room, totally focused on his mana control, when his concentration was broken by his phone ringing. It was late, so he picked it up thinking it might be an emergency. It was Adelia who apologized for the late hour, but said she had important news. Mrs. Constellation is awake. Now that was awesome news. He thanked Adelia and told her to keep some time free. He was excited to finally meet his students face to face. But more importantly, we see the black cat looking on in terror as its master starts seething about something. His patron Constellation was on the verge of a complete meltdown. You really had to feel for the guy. This whole mess kicked off about 10 minutes ago. He was just doing his job, keeping an eye on the gym's security feed, a little favor his master had asked of him. He didn't really see the point, but hey, you don't say no. That's when he accidentally caught some classroom footage of a body getting unceremoniously tossed out. For a second, he was totally panicking, thinking there was a dead body at his school. But once he zoomed in, he realized the person was just taking a very, very forceful nap. His master, intrigued, told him to rewind the footage to get the full scoop on what went down. And that's how they pieced it together. Yen Lang was the one who went on the attack. She basically flattened the poor student the moment he walked in. The Constellation then watched through the cameras as some girl snagged Juke's used towel and gave it a deep, questionable sniff. At that point, her jealousy went into overdrive. Her rage wasn't about how weird the act was, but because she wasn't the one doing it. Can you believe the fit she's throwing the governor of the underworld is absolutely livid and is now vowing to erase that girl from existence? The masked cat just thought to himself that his Constellation's little temper tantrums were becoming a much more regular occurrence. He could recall tons of times she'd gotten mad over nothing, but lately it had been on another level, and he was positive Yuke was the reason. To this day, the cat still couldn't wrap his head around why his powerful Constellation insisted on calling the boy her master. How could some teenager possibly be the boss of a divine being who's been around for more than 300 years? But pondering the cosmic mysteries would have to wait. Calming down his Constellation before she went completely nuts was the top priority. Just then, someone called his name. Speak of the devil, it was the main man himself. He walked into the room and asked, "Hey, were you just talking with Luminous?" The startled cat confirmed he was. More importantly, the protagonist announced they were going to use the black cat's abilities to take a trip somewhere far away. Juke casually dropped their destination. We're going to the United Kingdom. The scene shifts to a meeting in an incredibly fancy mansion where a group of people in masks are gathered around a large table. The man who seemed to be the boss, Baek Jang, the leader of the alchemists, asked if the plan was ready to go. One of his subordinates confirmed it, revealing there were about 200 magical security circles on the ceilings in Valhalla, with around 100 of them set up right in the dorm where Yuke was staying. This news seemed to give Baek Jang a moment's pause, but he quickly dismissed it, saying it was irrelevant now. Those little traps would be completely useless against someone with the Constellation's power. The other men all agreed, boasting that with the immutable alchemist Constellation backing them, they were basically invincible. Their strategy was for the leader to disable all the magic circles, then they'd make a beeline for Yuke. They also noted they'd need a spell to handle any interference from Juke's friends. One of the men pointed out that they absolutely couldn't overlook Juke's allies. It would make a much bigger splash if they managed to take out his entire entourage as well. Believe it or not, these guys were planning to wipe out everyone just to earn some serious street cred in the world of villains. Taking out the most celebrated prodigy at Valhalla would do wonders for their reputation, which is why they greenlit this whole assassination gig for Juke and his team. Just as he was finishing his monologue, something shocking happened. All of his henchmen lost their heads, literally. A new masked group entered the room, commenting that they had a feeling this was going to happen. The leader then asked, "So who is it you're trying to kill?" One of her companions answered for them, saying they should have dealt with this crew a long time ago and that they'd waited far too long. The man with a mask covering his eyes added that they already had a plan to eliminate this group. They just decided to move the timeline up. The alchemist leader was getting nervous and demanded to know who they were. The woman simply replied, "The mask should be a dead giveaway." But if that's not enough, she added, showing them a tattoo on her neck depicting the mask of the one-horned god. The head alchemist was stunned that this notorious cult was after them. The woman told him, "Up until now, you were nobody. That's changed." One of the masked attackers leaped from the shadows to strike the final blow, only to be surprised when the alchemist defended himself with a shield that flared up around his body. He managed to completely deflect the attack. The masked assailant grumbled that a defense of that level shouldn't have been enough, while Baek Jang was still wondering why they were so eager to kill him. He then expanded his barrier, launching the masked man backward, who had to jam his sword into the ground to stop his momentum. Baek Jang declared that he was about to show them the real power of someone who serves an S-rank constellation. "My power is on a whole other level," he boasted, sliding a ring onto his finger. The ring seemed to unlock his constellation's power, and the energy he was putting out was staggering. The masked woman remarked, I didn't realize their constellation was an S-rank." The blindfolded man confirmed it. He's contracted with the one called the Absolutely Immutable Alchemist. Baek Jang was flabbergasted when he heard that. They even knew the name of his constellation. The masked man told Baek Jang that he shouldn't be so surprised they knew all about his special patron. I mean, the guy's a pretty big deal. That relic he's rocking is a legit artifact from the Age of Ruin. The girl in the mask just scoffed, "An S-ranker. Is that supposed to be a big deal or something? You guys are impressed by that." They went on to explain that Baek Jang got his fame by stumbling into a contract with an S-rank relic, which suddenly made everyone obsessed with artifacts from the Age of Ruin. That's what kicked off the massive spike in interest, and you can bet the prices skyrocketed right along with it. The masked character sighed. To think someone could be blessed with such incredible power and just use it to run a crew of thugs. Baek Jang, gathering energy in his palm, lunged forward, yelling, "You're all a bunch of hypocrites!" All of a sudden, magic circles lit up around them as spears narrowly missed. The girl, completely surprised, muttered, "Whoa, I didn't even notice these circles. Did he set all this up?" He unleashed his power once more. A new circle flared to life right behind the girl, and another spear shot past her. She couldn't help but wonder, just how many of these traps did he plant here? The alchemist leader was thinking, these people are absolute monsters. How in the world were they sensing every single attack from the magic circles? For Baek Jang, it was crystal clear. He had no idea what kind of abilities they possessed or which constellation they were contracted with, but he figured it didn't really matter. Even though he was being pushed back, Baek Jang was confident that his constellation's absolute defense was unbreakable. With that in mind, he didn't need to sweat the defense. He fired up his magic again, launching another barrage at his foes. But to his complete shock, nothing happened. His ability didn't activate. His opponents just stood there waiting for an attack that was never coming. The girl taunted him, "Hey, now where are all those killer attacks you were bragging about?" Baek Jang was frozen stiff with terror. What was going on? The blindfolded man explained calmly, "I sensed a whole network of magic circles when we arrived. 1,200 precisely, so we just shut them all down." Baek Jang sputtered, "How could you possibly disable that many traps without me even noticing?" The man who looked like he stepped out of an anime commented, "Oh, we didn't disable them, we just blocked them, it's different." Getting bored with the chit-chat, the girl flared her aura and threw a massive punch. While Baek Jang managed to leap out of the way, the aftershock still slammed into him. His absolute defense had been shattered and he was actually hurt. Baek Jang couldn't wrap his head around it. How was this even possible? In the next instant, another attack was already on him. He sidestepped it by a hair's breadth, but it still managed to slice his cheek. These guys were relentless, and his defense was getting torn apart like paper. He tried launching another counterattack, but they effortlessly neutralized that too. He couldn't even scratch them. The swordsman noted, "Hey, this guy's actually pretty tough. He's not just coasting on his constellation's power." It dawned on Baek Jang with a sickening feeling that these people were on a completely different level than him. If his defenses couldn't keep him safe anymore, there was no way he could win. His only option left was to figure out how to escape. But first he had to ask, "Wait, did you guys already wipe out the entire Alchemist Guild? And hey, if I surrender and promise to quit the whole villain gig, think you could let me walk?" The masked man replied, "Oh, that's not the issue here. You playing the bad guy, we couldn't care less. The real problem is you tried to take out someone you really shouldn't have." Baek Jang's mind raced. "You're telling me the most notorious villain guild on the planet came after me all because of Ju Hook?" Seeing no room for negotiation, he decided it was time for his trump card. He had to activate his relic. It was his only shot at survival. The sheer volume of mana he released was staggering, making even the seasoned hunters remark on how unnatural it felt. Baek Jang called upon his constellation, offering a pact. The immutable alchemist answered his summons and agreed. He was trading his own life force and years off his life for the full might of his patron. It was like the alchemist itself was about to descend in person. Just then the masked man interrupted. "So sorry to bother an alchemist mid-summon, but I've got a message from the sacred constellation Dugui. The message was simple. "Alchemist, this lowlife tried to hurt our benefactor, the revered god of war." Hearing that name made one of the alchemist's ethereal eyes widen in shock. It then turned to its contractor, demanding, "Is what they say true?" The man, completely terrified, stammered, "No, I just tried to kill some guy named Kim Ju Hayak." "That's so unfair for you to ask me that." The constellation's voice boomed back. "What's unfair is how unbelievably stupid you are." The alchemist's manifestation immediately halted. Then it delivered the final blow. "The contract between us is hereby terminated." He was utterly baffled by the whole turn of events. The masked man piped up, "And now their constellation has officially declared it's going to kill you personally." Wait, why did I say her? Oh, right, look at that flowing hair in the back. I'm pretty sure it's a lady. Anyway, back to our main character. He finally reached his destination, having traveled to England to meet with Adelia Ventrick. The Black Cat flatly stated, "What you're asking for is impossible. There's just no way to get all the constellations together at once." So the protagonist summarized, "Okay, let me get this straight. It's impossible for all the constellations to meet with me in one place at the same time unless we go through the sanctification process. So, yep, that's the long and short of it," the cat confirmed. "But that method will work." That's not a simple fix, since every single contractor has to forge a brand new pact with their constellation, which eats up a ton of magical power. The other option is way more intense. A contractor with a divine pact can burn their own life force to physically manifest the constellation. And if you've been paying attention, that's exactly what went down a little while ago. Juya then wonders if he could just, touch both relics at the same time to have a conference call with both constellations. Adelia has to gently explain that this is, completely impossible. When you touch a relic, you get zapped into the imaginary realm where that constellation hangs out. A guy can't be in two different dimensions at once. There's simply no way to get those two separate worlds to overlap. Another important piece of info is that constellations are ridiculously powerful, and once they grant a sacred contract and settle into a relic, they're stuck there. No take-backsies. While our hero is listening to all his brilliant ideas get shot down one by one, Barca chimes in from inside his head. He pretty much asks why Juya doesn't already know this stuff since it was covered in class. It's painfully obvious he was dozing off. The protagonist mentally shoots back that the next time he sees Barca, he's getting a knuckle sandwich for that sarcasm. Juya just says if there's no other way, he'll do it differently. He'll just get them to communicate with each other and swap notes. But both the Black Cat and Adelia pipe up saying there's a bit of a problem with that plan. Apparently, ever since Juya showed up, their constellations have been chatting nonstop and they can't get a word in edgewise. Luminous is sweetly talking to her dear friend, gushing about how long it's been, and her rival is right there with her saying the exact same thing. Our hero had really hoped they would have matured after all this time, but they seem to have the same old dynamic from when he was their master. He lets out a sigh, really wishing they were on better terms now. He cuts them both off, saying, "Hey, stop for a second and listen." The Black Cat and Adelia are absolutely floored to see their mighty constellations obey him without a moment's hesitation. Juya explains that the person who forced them to become constellations and lose their bodies is making a move again. That last disaster was all his handiwork. Juya warns that something even bigger than a disaster could be on the horizon. Because of that, he's hoping to borrow their power a few times until he gets his original strength back. He asks if they're cool with that. Adelia's constellation says it would be an absolute pleasure. The Black Cat's constellation declares she's ready to give it her all to help her master. He's delighted to get the girl's approval to form a contract with them. Juya figures all he needs now is to find 3 more of his disciples, and he has to find them before the Lord of the Labyrinth decides to act again. Then our hero orders the Black Cat to connect the Ventric Mansion to Valhalla Academy with a handy portal. He's going to be visiting pretty often from now on, so a shortcut will make things a lot easier. With that, he announces he's taking off. Juya leaves Adelia and the Black Cat behind, suggesting they should stick around and get to know each other again. Adelia, looking curious, says she has a quick question first. She asks if he actually owns the market. He confirms that he does, and mentions that due to a few recent developments, he's now also the owner and director of Valhalla Academy. Adelia wonders why he's getting tangled up with the Academy, and the cat chimes in that it's probably for the same reason the Ventric family now serves him. It didn't take more than a few words for them to be on the same page. We cut to another part of the world where night has fallen. A masked cult gathers for a meeting with the constellation they worship. Crystals begin to glow and their constellation makes contact. They report that their enemies have been taken care of. The constellation, whose voice is revealed to be a woman's, says that in that case, it's time to move on to the next task. I'm starting to think our protagonist only ever had female disciples, and this is just another one of them. Their new mission is to protect Juya, a direct order from their leader. A masked man asks how exactly they're supposed to do that. Should they follow him? Should they just walk up and introduce themselves? The constellation tells them to just follow him from a distance. At this, a masked girl asks how they're supposed to pull that off without getting spotted. The constellation sidesteps the question, telling them to reveal themselves only when a certain word is spoken, though we don't know what that word is yet. I guess we'll just have to find out when the moment is right. The next day, we're back at Valhalla Academy. Juya has just shown up to do some training when he runs into someone unexpected. Honestly, the whole situation is just plain weird. Si-hyuk asks Juya to make him his apprentice too. This completely catches our hero off guard. The guy repeats his request asking to be his disciple. Juya, still surprised, just blurts out, "I don't want to." Getting shot down that fast leaves Si-hyuk speechless, and he mutters out loud that the rumors must be true. This, of course, gets Juya's attention. The rumors were that Juya only takes on female disciples because he's trying to build his own personal harem. Ju-hook shot him a look and said, "Say that one more time and we're done here, unless you've got some kind of death wish." He added, "And for the record, these two follow me because they want to. The only person he's ever actually taken on as a disciple is Yang Lang. So don't you ever bring up that nonsense about building a harem again." Ju-hook pointed out that he was already juggling 3 people as it was. He simply didn't have the bandwidth to train someone new. It was a solid point, and Si-hyuk had to admit it made perfect sense. Still, the protagonist couldn't help but feel it was a bit of a waste. He was seriously pressed for time these days, but having a guy like this around to help grind monsters wouldn't be half bad. That's when an idea sparked. "Hey, Yang Lang, listen up," Ju-hook called out. "You're going to be in charge of training this guy." Since they're both all about physical combat, he figured their styles would mesh well, making it super convenient for them to train together. With that all squared away, Ju-hook announced he was going to work out, telling them to stay put and get to know each other. Si-hyuk couldn't forget how his face got rearranged, and that was when she had absolutely no reason to hit him. So what in the world was going to happen to him now that she'd have plenty of legitimate reasons to clock him during training? Yonglong, looking flustered, asked if he had a problem with that. Well, Sehook started, I happened to see the security footage. You came back after I was out cold and stomped on my head a few times. He figured she must have done it because she was embarrassed or something along those lines, and he guessed the reason was that he'd walked in on her while she was drying off. The girl let out a silent sigh of relief. He had no idea the towel wasn't even hers. Even after realizing she'd done the guy a massive wrong, her mood flipped in an instant, and she just told him he needed to be more aware of his surroundings. All right, let's get started, she declared. I'll show you my training routine. Meanwhile, the protagonist was just happy to see his students getting along so well. Just then, Sharon approached the protagonist, wanting to ask him something. She was curious about what his plans were for the upcoming holiday break next week. Now that they were in the special class, they didn't have to show up for every lesson or deal with exams, which meant a ton of free time. It was her subtle way of trying to get closer. Joo-hook just replied that he was planning to crank up his training intensity over the break. Arum immediately chimed in that she was going to do the same. The protagonist asked if she didn't have any personal plans, reminding her that outside of their required training sessions, her time was her own. He was basically trying to tell her to go live a little and use her time however she wanted. But Choi Ram just beamed and said she wanted to train hard to get strong just like him. That was her goal. Fair enough, he replied, if that's what you want. Yoo So-yan then added that she'd also be coming in to train during the holidays. A week later, over at the Hero Academy in the United States, the president, a man named Beck, was staring intently at a sword that was practically humming with power. He'd been lost in thought while examining the weapon. He recalled it arriving just a few days earlier when his friend Logan the Destroyer had dropped by. Logan had shown up unannounced to report that he'd taken care of the people who had been bothering his son. It turns out Logan had completely wiped out the entire villain group known as the Shinja. He remarked that they were a bunch of weaklings ultimately, but there was something really odd. By the time he reached their leader, the guy was already in pieces. Beck wondered aloud if it might have been some kind of internal power struggle. Logan admitted he had no clue what went down since he'd planned on getting all his intel straight from the leader. He also mentioned another reason he went after them. He's still trying to track down a group called the Black Lion, the criminal syndicate that was behind his father's murder. The reason he came to the academy was that he found this artifact during the raid and couldn't just leave it. It's called the Sword of Light. Ever since he stormed their base, this sword had been constantly whispering inside his head. Since it was driving him nuts, he wanted to lock it away in the academy's high-security vault. Beck was intrigued, asking what exactly the sword was saying to him. Logan revealed that the sword was whispering for anyone watching this video to go ahead and hit the like button. It was also whispering for him to take it to its master, and so the object had been sitting there ever since. When Beck first tried to store it in the vault with the other artifacts, they all started reacting violently, forcing him to take it out immediately. So now it was just sitting in his office, which got him thinking what kind of constellation a being sealed within a relic could possibly have, a master. As he was pondering this very question, a massive explosion from behind him jolted him back to reality. He whipped around just in time to see his academy being torn apart, with several buildings already heavily damaged. Before he could even process the shock, a monstrous figure landed right behind him, likely shattering the rest of the building he was in. The demonic-looking creature simply glared at him as Beck demanded to know who it was and why it was attacking the school. "That's no human," Beck noted, eyeing its grotesque tongue. He realized this intruder had bypassed all security measures undetected and laid waste to the campus. This was definitely not your average trespasser. The demon chuckled, saying he really ought to just kill him without a word, but he was in such a good mood from finally getting his name back and returning to the world that he felt like chatting. Beck was completely lost. All this talk about coming back from the dead and getting a name back was pure nonsense to him. The demon revealed its true name was Hongwei. Beck shot back that a name like that was pretty rare around these parts and figured the demon had no clue who he was, so he'd do the honors. His name was Beck, and he was the president of the Hero Academy. And in his heyday as a hunter, folks knew him as Beck the Bomber, a line he delivered while smashing a powerful fist right into the demon's gut. A vibrant green energy pulsed through the creature's entire frame. Beck was banking on a one-hit wonder, but honestly, it didn't even faze the thing. The demon just looked thrilled and said he had a similar trick up his sleeve. Beck couldn't help but think that a blow like that would have turned any regular human into a fine red mist. The demon then charged up its own attack and slammed Beck in the chest in the exact same way, only this one released a burst of lava that torched the area on impact. In the next instant, the building erupted, sending the man sailing through the air. The force of that attack nearly made Beck black out. Before he even had the chance to faint, the creature was on him again, landing another bone-crushing hit that slammed him into the ground. Just taking a kick like that is brutal, so getting spiked into the pavement should have been a game ender for Beck. But the guy was ridiculously tough and still breathing, though he wouldn't be for long if the monster in front of him had any say in it. Hong Wei just taunted him, saying the guy was surprisingly hard to put down. It was a different story for the surrounding worms. They couldn't even take the shockwave from his arrival. It was only then that the president finally noticed the bodies of his academy staff scattered across the floor. Seeing that sent the man into a blind rage. He went full Green Lantern, channeling his power and smashing the ground, sending an energy wave hurtling toward Hong Wei, who didn't even bother to move. His attack landed dead center on the target. Beck gritted his teeth, saying that even if he couldn't put a scratch on the monster, he'd fight it to his last breath. Before the smoke could even clear, he fired up his green energy again, deciding to go all in with one final max power attack. He prayed this would be enough to finish the creature. But to his utter dismay, the monster emerged from the smoke without a single scratch on it. Hong Wei simply said he'd demonstrate a real explosive attack, then tapped Beck's arm. The skin instantly bubbled and then completely blew apart. The sheer force of that one tap was enough to take the man out. He crashed onto his back like a ton of bricks. Hong Wei was absolutely delighted to have his body back and to have stumbled upon such a durable plaything. Beck had actually survived 3 of his attacks. He remarked that back in his Constellation days, he'd never run into a contractor who was half as tough as this guy. Beck was floored to hear this thing was a Constellation, which Hong Wei happily confirmed. He was the one known as the Tyrant of Destruction. The Constellation Beck had a contract with practically jumped out of its skin upon hearing that name. The Constellation of Destruction was in a state of shock. This was just one more thing on the pile of stuff Beck didn't understand, but it cemented one fact: this monster was a genuine constellation walking around in the human world. Hong Wei declared that he'd come from another world and was about to send Beck off to one himself. Right before he could land the finishing blow, a voice called out asking if they could join the party. This left the demon utterly dumbfounded, wondering who would just stroll into a place that looked like a war zone. Beck, still flat on his back, looked over in shock, a sense of familiarity washing over him. It hit him that was Ju Hyuk, the kid from Valhalla Academy. The demon, having no idea who he was, just sneered and asked if he had a death wish. Our protagonist shot back that it was impossible since he came here to do the defeating, not the other way around. Ju Hyuk squinted at the demon and said he recognized that ugly face, the weird horns, the vampire fangs, and the red skin. He was Hong Wei, the chump from the 2nd floor of the Tower of Destruction. Being called a loser really seemed to set the guy off. Hong Wei roared, questioning what right this little punk had to speak to him that way. "Hey, a loser's a loser," our protagonist said coolly. "You'll remember that when you're on the ground." The mana rolling off Ju Hyuk felt strangely familiar to the monster, but he decided to ignore it and just obliterate this cocky kid once and for all. With a casual flick of his sword, the protagonist batted away Hong Wei's attack. That single effortless move was enough to jog the creature's memory. Hong Wei stammered that he'd never forget that feeling and then asked if the kid was, in fact, the hero. He had never in his wildest dreams thought someone could actually be reincarnated. Ju Hyuk just shrugged, asking what the big deal was. He said he never imagined the losers he'd already beaten would be kicking around as constellations either. The big red guy said he'd forgotten his own name long ago, and eventually everyone just started calling him a constellation, but things were different now. He had gotten his name back and his body along with it. He pointed out that it was a stark contrast to the protagonist, who was way weaker now than he used to be as a hero. "Compared to back then, you're nothing now," he sneered. Ju Hyuk just replied, "Well, obviously." The fact that he was just a high school kid still in his prime growing years made the demon absolutely ecstatic. He channeled a surge of energy into his palm, figuring this was the absolute perfect chance to get some payback. Our hero managed to block the attack, but the force of the collision made his sword start to smolder, and a grim look washed over his face. Sure, Hong Wei unleashed a massive blast that annihilated everything in front of him, but it still wasn't quite enough to put his opponent down for the count. He rocketed forward to land a solid blow, but the moment he swung, he realized he'd missed, yet again. Seriously, how much longer is this guy going to keep dodging? Ju Hyuk stayed silent, knowing he had just hit the absolute physical limit of his current body. This was a whole different ballgame from when he fought the Ice King in that imaginary realm where the constellations chill out. Back there, he could wield the full power of his past life even in this body. Now he was painfully aware his physical stats were barely on par with this loser. But Joo-hyuk wasn't about to let his opponent sense his unease. It wasn't too difficult, really. Hong-wee was an attack first think never kind of guy. Just as he was about to land his hit, he shouted that this was his ultimate move, and blocking it was completely useless. When the whole area erupted in a massive explosion, he was 100% certain he had nailed his target. Beck, still planted on the ground like a lawn ornament, was watching the brawl. He realized the demon had just been messing with him this entire time. That last attack was leagues more powerful than anything he had faced. The entire feel of the battle changed when a confident voice announced that Hong-wee should swallow his pride and accept his disciples' help, then immediately launched an assault on him. His right arm and horn clattered to the ground. Okay, that's terrifying, Hong-wee thought. The demon couldn't hold back a scream of pure pain and disbelief. Baffled, he demanded to know how he possibly survived the explosion. It shouldn't have been possible. Our hero's response was surprisingly simple. He didn't try to escape it, he just sliced right through it. That's insane, Hong-wee thought, but one thing was suddenly crystal clear. That sword was humming with someone else's power. And as he was now beating, this accursed hero was out of the question. With that, the demon turned tail and ran. Hong-wee told himself that pride is worthless when your life is on the line. It's smarter to escape today and get revenge tomorrow. Our legendary hero remarked that the whole scene was just pathetic. Hong-wee waltzes in here, kills everyone, then bolts the second his own life is in danger. And that our incredible protagonist declared is precisely why Hong-wee is a total scrub. He also added that it felt pretty darn good to wipe this red demon off the face of the earth again. Using the same move as before, he made a quick slash. Hong-wee, in his attempt to escape, turned his back for just a couple of seconds and felt his consciousness slowly begin to drift away. For a fleeting moment, he felt that same old terror. Joo-hyuk, like a true hero, had already turned his back on his enemy before he was even finished. After the body went still, he walked over to Hong-wee to perform the same ritual he used on his last foe, using his ring to absorb the demon's name and body. When he finished, not a single drop of blood remained, which meant the absorption was total. He did it in a flash. Remembering he had an audience, he glanced over and saw Beck was still there. Our hero said he'd been so wrapped up in the fight he didn't even see Beck there, and then asked if the guy was okay. Beck managed to reply that he couldn't move, but at least he was breathing. Then he asked, "You're Kim Joo-hyuk, right? The student from Valhalla." Our protagonist was a bit surprised to be recognized. Beck just said that, well, he was actually pretty well known. It would have been more surprising if he didn't recognize him. The man then introduced himself as Beck, the director of the Hero Academy. "I really want to thank you for saving this place." Joo-hyuk just replied, "Honestly, I think I got here a little late since everything is already trashed. Anyway, the rescue squad will be here any minute, so you should just hang tight. As for me, I've got to run. I'm busy." The director was absolutely floored to see the kid casually open a dimensional portal. Only an elite few of the most powerful constellations in the world can pull off something like that. So yet again, the man was left standing there wondering who in the world this kid actually was. Mere seconds later, Logan came barreling onto the scene, yelling to see if he was all right. He saw on the news that the school was under attack and sprinted over as fast as he could. Right behind him, ambulances started rolling in to take care of the injured. The director noted that they had bigger fish to fry at the moment, and that he would fill him in on the details later. It might have been a few hours, or maybe even a day later, but everyone involved was checked into the hospital. And of course, the director was no exception. He was there too. The guy couldn't stop replaying it in his mind, how the protagonist got to the scene so fast, and of course how he dispatched that monster so effortlessly. "Sheesh, this kid never gives me a moment of peace," he thought to himself. After some time, Beck had given Logan the complete play-by-play of what he saw, which understandably left the hunter extremely skeptical. Having a constellation just pop into our world didn't add up, but the fact that it had so thoroughly beaten Beck was compelling evidence that it just might be true. But the part that really had everyone scratching their heads was how some kid managed to be the one to take that monster down. Logan figured it had to be some low-tier constellation that showed up because of a contract. After all, a 17-year-old kid beating a major power player just didn't add up, and yep, he knew his exact age. Beck chimed in asking if he knew a guy named Joo-hyuk. "Know him, of course I do. That was the very same kid who saved my son during a competition way back in Korea. He also made a name for himself by bagging a handful of villains." Logan still couldn't wrap his mind around it. Even if the kid was a little famous and had some skills defeating a constellation, was completely off the charts. "I've got a hunch," Beck said. He mentioned feeling a strangely familiar energy while the kid was in the middle of the fight. He suspected the kid had a contract with a seriously powerful constellation. And get this, he said, the kid looked like he'd been using that power his whole life. Beck also noted that if his gut feeling was right, it was the exact same energy he'd sensed at the black market. Even Logan had heard of this one. They called it the Commander of the Underworld, notorious for punching holes into other dimensions. Beck admitted it sounded absolutely ridiculous for someone so young to have a deal with a constellation of that caliber. But he was 100% certain about the energy he felt. The whole situation was super sketchy, so Logan knew he had to talk to the boy. "Where is he now?" he asked. Beck replied that he was probably at Valhalla Academy. But hold on, how could he have zipped over to the United States and then back to Korea in the blink of an eye? The answer nearly sent Logan into cardiac arrest. Beck said it was simple teleportation. He literally saw the kid open a portal and casually step inside. That power had to be from the black market constellation. You can only imagine how furious Logan was getting as he put all these pieces together. I can't even fathom the reason. The bottom line is, you can count the number of contractors on the planet who can teleport on one hand. And this suddenly connects Ju Hyuk to the very organization he's been hunting for years. That's why he needs to have a little chat with this kid like yesterday. We flash back to Valhalla Academy, where a certain black cat was minding his own business in his office when a portal suddenly ripped open and our hero stepped out. This naturally made him jump. He asked, "Whoa, have you just been waiting here for me?" The cat's smooth reply was, "You bet." Apparently his constellation had ordered him to give Ju Hyuk full support, no questions asked. So he'd been spectating the entire battle, poised to jump in if it looked like our hero was in any real trouble. Finding out he had a personal audience made our protagonist raise an eyebrow, and the cat just confirmed it with a nod. "I just opened a small private portal and was watching from there," he explained. Simple stuff. Our hero's reaction: "Okay, that's incredibly creepy." The cat probably sensed that he'd made things a little awkward, so he quickly clarified, "Hey, it's how we were able to spot that constellation's attack." Our protagonist, looking a bit suspicious himself, just went along with it. "Oh, right, true." But at the same time, his mind flashed back to the last time he spoke with his guide. The girl had told him another name would be sent next week, and this time it was someone from the Tower of Destruction. He'd questioned how she knew the date, but was fuzzy on the location details unlike before, and it clearly made her a bit antsy. She'd blamed it on the Lord of the Labyrinth, beefing up his security. She said that even though the big boss hadn't found her, he'd gotten extremely paranoid about information leaks recently. They'd talked a bit longer, and she'd warned him that meeting up would be much harder from now on because of Mr. Labyrinth's watchful eye. Our hero had called her out on it. She just sighed and said, "You're always so sharp, and yes, you're right." She was going to have to lie low for a while to avoid drawing any unwanted attention. With the new name in hand, she gave him the rundown on how to use the absorbed names with his ring. She explained that there are two main ways to go about it. The first option is to absorb a name and its general power. The second is to just yoink a specific skill from the name to use as he pleases. The downside to the first method is that he only gets a fraction of the absorbed name's power, not the full throttle version like the Lord of the Labyrinth gets. The second way has its own catch too. He can use a skill the target had, but he can't upgrade it at all. What that means is he's stuck using the skill at the exact same power level as the original owner. If the skill is weaker than he is, it's not going to be much help in a fight. From here on, how he uses the name's powers is entirely up to him. This news wasn't exactly thrilling for our protagonist, leaving him with a lot to think about. He'd been mulling it over all week, and now he finally had a new name to test drive. He decided to fire up the ring and absorb the name of the demon he had just wiped the floor with. The abilities were, to put it mildly, pretty lame. As soon as the absorption finished, the ring's glow faded. Our hero thought, "Is that it? I don't feel any different." While he was puzzling over this, the black cat spoke up. "All right, out with it." The black cat then got right to the point, asking about the spatial cut technique he'd used to take down Hong Wai. He confirmed that was indeed the move he used. "If that's the case," the black cat said with a curious look, "I'd like a demonstration." Ju Hyuk found this odd, pointing out that the black cat has a contract with that very same constellation but can't pull off the technique. The black cat admitted, looking a bit sheepish, that his skill with that particular ability wasn't exactly top tier. So he humbly asked the protagonist if he could maybe show him how it's done. With that, they decided to find a more open area for a proper demonstration. They ended up in the mountains, right behind the academy, where Ju Hyuk explained, "The spatial cut is actually pretty straightforward. Just do this first, pour your magical energy into your sword, then give your waist a good twist and just let it fly. Ju-hyuk demonstrated the spatial cut, and the slash tore clean through the forest in front of them and kept on going. The black cat remarked that, that was pretty much the gist of it. The power behind it was just terrifying, a completely insane attack. Still, the black cat couldn't help but think that Ju-hyuk was just as awful at teaching the technique as his own constellation was. Ju-hyuk's explanation was identical. It seemed his master must have learned from this guy. Both of them were just terrible teachers. The protagonist then asked if the cat got it or if he needed to see it again. As he did, he glanced around and noticed something was way off. His attack had sliced right through the mountain. That definitely wasn't part of the plan. He was sure he'd held back enough energy to stop at the trees. How in the world did this happen? On top of that, a normal attack should never have been that destructive. It hit him right then. This must be the effect of the magical power he'd absorbed, even though he didn't feel any different. It looked like the power boost showed up in his attacks, a fact that naturally had our protagonist absolutely thrilled. He quickly said his goodbyes to the black cat, mentioning he had to run, but would be happy to show him again some other time. Ju-hyuk was buzzing with excitement to see what other effects this new power had. Before, he was a little doubtful about how important all this was. But now, he was completely sold on absorbing more names. Those clowns from the Tower of Destruction were about to get what was coming to them again. Meanwhile, in some shadowy, unknown location, a man was studying a map of the world. These were likely the spots where the names had been dispatched. Whatever he just saw on that map had him seriously on edge. He was lost in thought when someone else walked in, breaking his concentration. The newcomer asked if he'd handled the business with the names just as their master had ordered. He confirmed that, yes, he had distributed them exactly as instructed. But, he began, we have a problem. As he spoke, his friend couldn't help but notice his white knuckle grip on his weapon. And so he had to ask, what's with the death grip on that spear? That was a question the guy clearly didn't want to answer, and it was starting to get on his nerves. The spearman just said, let's stick to what actually matters. Shall we? Why, he's always holding his spear is nobody's business. He pointed out, besides, you're one to talk, walking around with a weapon yourself. The redhead shot back, carrying a weapon and being surgically attached to one are two totally different things. The red-haired man definitely had a bone to pick with the spear wielder. He grumbled, the Lord of the Labyrinth must really have a soft spot for you. If he didn't, I would have put you in the ground a long time ago. Anyway, about that report, the redhead continued, why did one of the names just vanish? And don't tell me you didn't organize the list exactly like the master asked, he yelled. The names were sent over precisely as instructed. In a situation like this, they expected some to fall in battle, but that was only supposed to happen after the attack order was officially given. This is a major screw-up, and I'm reporting it to the master of the labyrinth immediately, the red-haired man declared as he started to leave. Technically, the spearman should have been the one to report it, but he wouldn't budge. He just stood there, stubbornly clutching his spear. Over at the academy, the black cat was in his office about to get a very sudden and unexpected visitor. Logan, the #1 American hero, was there. He wanted to have a word with a student and just needed the director's permission to do so. The black cat was pretty sure this was all about Ju-hyuk taking down that constellation at the Hero Academy, but he had to play dumb. He just smoothly invited Logan in to talk. After a moment of pretty uncomfortable silence, Logan decided to just cut to the chase. He asked point blank, are you aware that your student Ju-hyuk was recently at the Hero Academy where he defeated a constellation? The black cat confirmed that he was aware. Excellent, Logan said. That brings me to 2 questions I have for you. First, how did a student know a constellation was about to appear? And how in the world did he manage to defeat it? That was not an easy question. The black cat had no idea what to say, so Logan just moved right along to his second point. How did that kid manage to teleport from one continent to another in an instant? And just so we're clear, he added, I won't accept some vague hand-wavy answer for this one. The black cat realized the hero must have sensed the black market's energy during the protagonist's fight, so he decided it was time to come clean. He confessed that Ju-hyuk has a contract with the ruler of the underworld, the very same constellation he has a contract with. While that was a bit of a shocker, Logan pointed out, that's not a full contract though, it's only a partial one. So if that's the case, how is he able to teleport? The black cat could see where Logan's suspicions were heading. He figured the man thought Kim Ju-hyuk was connected to the Bloodlions. Good, you're aware of them, Logan said. That makes this conversation a whole lot easier. The black cat explained that he was very familiar with the Bloodlions because he had to do a deep dive investigation on them in the past. And it's all connected to the black market, he said. At that, Logan revealed, "Then, you must also know that organization is the one that killed my father." "Years ago, I hunted down and killed every single member I could find," Logan said, "and yet I never got a single lead on the one in charge. After all this time, the only thing I've managed to confirm is that all members of the Bloodlions are contractors who can use spatial movement." The Black Cat admitted he'd discovered the same thing, but added, "Kim-Ju is not a member of the Bloodlions. It's true the kid managed to use teleportation to hop between countries, but that's only because he has a constellation power helping him out." Logan then asked, "So, the ruler of the underworld can perform teleportation?" "The answer is yes," the cat replied. "That's how he created the entire dimension where the market is located." "Well, that does answer a lot," Logan admitted, "but I have to be honest, I'm not satisfied with those answers. It's entirely possible the market is part of the Bloodlions and is just covering for this kid." At this point, the Black Cat cut in, "That's a pretty wild assumption, Logan. The market doesn't work with villains." Logan pushed back, "It's not just an assumption. It's obvious to anyone that there are very few contractors in the world who can use spatial movement. Therefore, it's completely natural to speculate that the ruler of the underworld is part of the Bloodlions." Furious, Logan slammed his glass down on the table. "And it's also incredibly strange that the owner of the market is giving all this support to a simple high school student. To me, this whole thing looks like a you scratch my back, I'll scratch yours kind of deal, and either this kid or the market is involved." The Black Cat calmly stated, "Kim-Ju and I have a special relationship, and neither of us is involved with the Bloodlions. You're starting to cross some boundaries that really shouldn't be crossed." Logan just shot back, "And what happens when those boundaries get crossed?" The Black Cat said politely, "I've already told you about my constellation's ability, which is confidential information. From this moment on, I don't believe a word you say. You need to leave, do your own investigation, and only come back when you have actual proof of what you're claiming." Even though the cat was being perfectly civil, the man just had to get hostile again, asking, "So what happens if I refuse, Right then, the Black Cat's tone turned ice cold and threatening as it stated that Logan would simply have to die. Logan just cracked a smile and shot back, "Oh, really? And I suppose you're the one who's going to kill me? You honestly think you're up to the task?" "Of course not," the cat admitted. "Someone like me would never have the power to do something like that. But if you keep pushing it, the constellation itself will come down here and end you personally." It was clear these were the constellation's words, not the cat's. "Keep provoking us, and you're dead. Also, my constellation has a little message for your constellation. You better get your contractor on a tighter leash, you idiot." Logan was clearly irritated by this, but just then a notification window popped up beside him. It was a message from his own constellation telling him to get out of there immediately and not make a scene. Logan knew that if his own constellation was telling him to back down, this was serious business no matter how powerful he thought he was. The constellation's words are law after all, so the man just said he'd drop it for today but promised he would be back. He vowed that next time he wouldn't show up empty-handed. He'd bring proof for every last thing he claimed. Once the man finally left the room, the Black Cat looked completely drained. Now it had to drag itself to Adelia and give a full report. Meanwhile, let's hop over to a different scene at the student dormitory. Our protagonist was hard at work testing out that new cultivation method he'd picked up at the start of the story. He mused that he never had anything like this in his past life, and was just now realizing how incredibly efficient this technique was. The results were a staggering 30 times faster than his old method. Honestly, the only thing holding him back at this point was his own body. His magical output was already far beyond what his physical form could safely handle. Even though all of his training was geared toward boosting his physical power, it was still his biggest weakness. Back in his previous life, his physical build had been legendary, second to none. It was that potent combination of a near-perfect body and an immense reserve of magical energy that made him a true hero. While meditating, he wondered if Barch felt anything when he ran into Hongwei again. His totally useless constellation replied with a simple no, and then asked if Ju Hyuk was still having trust issues. The protagonist countered that it wasn't about trust. There was nothing stopping the Lord of the Labyrinth from simply brainwashing Barch all over again and turning him back into a villain. All Barch could say was that he was still powerless and hadn't felt anything out of the ordinary. He then switched gears, asking Ju Hyuk if he hadn't sensed the strange energy coming from that one building at the Hero Academy. The aura it gave off was supposedly a dead ringer for the energy Ju Hyuk used to have. Our hero admits he didn't feel a thing, but he agrees that if it's true, it could be a huge lead. He makes a mental note to head back there soon to do some digging. The scene then jumps to an undisclosed location somewhere in the world. On a remote island sits an even more secluded building where dozens of individuals have gathered. It's pretty obvious they're the villains, especially when they mention getting their names and showing up as commanded. One of them points out that while it's almost a full house, a few people are conspicuously missing. Someone else asks exactly who the no-shows are, to which a fish-faced man replies that the idiot didn't come. Apparently, the guy's sheer stupidity led him to disobey orders. As much as they despise him, they wonder who in this modern era could possibly defeat such a powerhouse. Their best guess is that the moron got cocky, underestimated his opponent, and ended up getting trounced. After all, any of the returners who die here are cursed to wander for about another 300 years. One of them pipes up that their mission is to cause some major destruction, but they have to wait for the signal to kick things off. The fish-faced guy then asks who the other missing person is. They tell him it's the one called Watcha, the corpse collector. All Fishface has to say is that he hopes the guy didn't get himself killed while trying to show off like a fool. If he did die, it would be a very bad sign. As it turns out, Watcha skipped the meeting but sent a message along. In it, he vowed to make some serious waves at the global competition. With that, we're whisked back to Valhalla Academy. Our protagonist is in the middle of a grueling training session, pushing himself to the absolute limit when he notices the place is unusually crowded. Even during the vacation period, everyone was there, training their hearts out, except for his one official disciple, Yan Lang. She had let him know she was visiting her family in China and would be away for a few days. He finds this strange, considering she was supposed to have cut ties with them, and he can't help but worry. After a bit, he calls for everyone to take 5. Now he's feeling the pressure, because with her gone, he has to personally manage the training for all the other students. Aram approaches him, asking where Yan Lang has disappeared to since she's skipping out on practice. Ju Hyuk plays it cool, explaining she's just handling some family business and that it's no biggie for her, which is a total lie, by the way. The girls complain that they'd all planned to train together. Ju Hyuk internally smirks, remembering how Aram also bails on training sometimes for her own family succession issues. So if she's complaining, it's a bit hypocritical. For the time being, he puts Aram in charge of leading the others. As the girl goes to explain the new arrangement and announce herself as their temporary master, Ju Hyuk can't help but feel a swell of pride watching the scene. For him, there's nothing better than seeing his disciples getting along. Boxy remarks that his master seems even prouder than usual. Ju Hyuk agrees, but adds that it's a shame his original disciples can't all get together like this anymore. He admits he wishes they could just have a relaxed chat one more time. This prompts Boxy to recall something he witnessed many years ago, revealing there was a time when all the constellations gathered in one place. He says that ages ago, a door suddenly materialized out of thin air in his imaginary realm. His curiosity got the better of him, so he couldn't resist opening it to see what was on the other side. Inside, it seemed like every other constellation was gathered, and based on their expressions, they were all just as surprised to be there as he was. Boxy explains that he bolted from the place in a hurry, terrified someone would recognize him as the former powerless master of the Tower of Destruction. If anyone had recognized him back then, they could have snuffed him out in an instant. He notes that after 2 days, the door vanished and never reappeared. Ju Hyuk had never heard anything like this before, and the mere possibility of it happening again gets him incredibly excited. We then cut to China, to the home of Yan Lang's family. They are clearly stunned by her sudden and unexpected visit. The girl gets straight to the point she's there because she wants to see the family relic, if at all possible. Her aunt is running the family at the moment, and for her, letting Yan Lang see the sacred relic is no trouble at all. It was surprisingly easy. They quickly head to the palace where the relic is housed. On the way, Yan Lang gets a sinking feeling and asks what happened to her mother. Her aunt reveals the shocking truth. Seo Yanhua was expelled from the family for her misdeeds. What's more, after the constellation broke its contract with her, she was no longer eligible to be the clan leader. Yan Lang was completely in the dark about this. She only knew the contract was voided because Ju Hyuk had exposed the truth to the constellation. Her aunt confirms that it was thanks to Ju Hyuk that everyone finally learned how her mother had been secretly stunting the growth of any clan members who might have challenged her position. As Yan Lang was thanking the protagonist for saving her clan's future, she started to get a little embarrassed. She felt this overwhelming sense of gratitude toward Ju Hyuk, and it was just really nice to see other people finally acknowledge his worth. Ryan brought up the fact that the clan leader position was still vacant, which was turning into a major problem. Yan Lang asked if her aunt could possibly step up to the plate since she seemed like the perfect candidate for the job. Ryan had to explain that it was impossible for her to lead both the White Lotus Academy and the family at the same time. It was a long-standing family tradition that one person couldn't hold both roles. She was about to say more to her niece, but a powerful explosion suddenly demanded their attention. Yanlang was caught completely by surprise. The very place they had been walking toward was now engulfed in flames. They took off at a full sprint, knowing this had to be an attack on their clan. On the way, Yanlang asked her aunt if she knew who was behind it. Her aunt explained that their family is the top dog in China, but with the clan leader being exiled, their morale had completely tanked. Because of that weakness, a number of other families were now making a move against them. An attack of this scale was really only a matter of time. When they reached the gate, they busted it down to get to the enemy as fast as possible. The scene inside was absolutely horrifying, with countless people already having lost their lives. The two of them were frozen in shock at the sight before them. Invaders armed with all sorts of weapons were everywhere, covered from head to toe in blood. To think they would commit such atrocities just for a power grab. Yanlang wondered if any of these people even deserved to walk away from this alive. Before her aunt could utter another word, Yanlang charged in. The men spotted their arrival and shouted that Ryan was the one they needed to eliminate to take power. With Yen gone, Ryan was the new head of the Snow Clan. They declared they were there to seize the title of the strongest clan and to get revenge for everything the former clan head had done to them. Yanlang was boiling with rage, but she still demanded to know what cruelties her mother had supposedly committed against their clan. Ryan quickly told her that as far as they knew, Yen had suppressed other clans, but she had never taken a life. Her niece became even more incensed by the attack. Yanlang admitted that she had her own issues with her family's past, but this was way beyond anything she could tolerate. She lunged forward, slamming into the first person in her path. The man swung his sword through the air, but in a move that seemed utterly irrational, she met the steel blade with her bare fists. The girl not only blocked the attack, but completely overpowered him, sending him crashing into another man and knocking them both out cold. The bald man in charge looked stunned. With a single move, she had just defeated two of his absolute best fighters. While the dude was still trying to process what was going on, Yanlang snuck up and delivered the kick of a lifetime. If that bald guy had a single hair left on his head, it would have been blasted clean off. With just one more swing, she took down another two guys. Her aunt watched on, seriously starting to wonder if she'd actually just killed them. She was also ridiculously stronger than before. Just what kind of insane, monstrous training did she go through with Juhyuk? As if to prove just how powerful she'd become, some guy tried to ambush her from the shadows. She didn't even bother to look his way. A simple flick of her hand was all it took to send him packing. Now her aunt was getting really interested in her niece's progress. The reality was, she was dead set on making her niece the next head of the clan. Meanwhile, deeper inside the palace, Yanlang's sisters were in the middle of their own fight with the invaders. Truth be told, the two of them were barely holding their ground. Everyone else had already been taken out, and they were hitting their absolute limit. They understood that without a leader, their family would be an easy target. No matter how bad it got, they were prepared to lay down their lives to defend the clan. Still, they couldn't help but think that going out like this really sucked. Their dramatic last stand was cut short when Yanlang suddenly appeared, bulldozing a path through the enemy lines with nothing but her fists. Next to her, Suryeon was unleashing a relentless barrage of ice magic. The spectacle grabbed the attention of everyone on the battlefield, both allies and enemies. For the first time, it felt like they might actually make it out of this alive. The family's two strongest members had arrived to help. Yanlang made it crystal clear what the top priority was: wiping out these invaders. Her sisters, ecstatic to have backup, couldn't have agreed more. With her nerves settled, the more tomboyish sister regained her composure and started fighting back too. Her elegant sister got fired up as well, drawing her sword and eagerly sending a few more bad guys to meet their maker. She was giving it her all, fighting with everything she had, but in her zeal, she left herself open and was about to be taken out herself. Yanlang jumped in to save her, pulling her back from the brink. It was a gesture that said she was finally letting go of the past. Yanlang even called her little sister. Hearing those words was enough to warm the girl's heart right up. Then again, it might have just been the roaring fires all around them, but you get the picture. Naturally, the invaders were pretty spooked by the arrival of Yanlang and this unknown powerhouse. That's when their leader stepped forward, asking his crew if they really thought they had the luxury of being afraid. The guy's philosophy was simple. Anyone showing a hint of fear was dead weight in a fight, and as such didn't deserve to keep breathing. He then caved in his own subordinate's skull, and what followed was something you could only guess from the horrified looks on the girls' faces. Ryan's eyes narrowed as she told the others, "I know who that is. That's Shi Huang, the head of the Gamma family." Now that he'd been spotted, the man just chuckled and said, "Well, I guess there's no reason to keep up this awkward little act, is there?" He fully admitted to being the Gamma family's top dog, and he was there to make sure they became the #1 family in all of China. Yanlang stepped up, calling him out. "You're talking about all the chaos you're causing like it's just another Tuesday for you." Completely ignoring her, the leader laid out his proposal. "If the Snow family kneels to us, we'll graciously let you live." But the fine print was that they'd all have to become his personal slaves. Yanlong's only thought was, if this clown actually survives, is he just going to keep yapping? Clearly, this dirtbag wasn't interested in a friendly chat, so he decided to jump straight to his second, more violent option. He figured he would get rid of this outspoken girl first, and then he'd take care of Xiao Ryan right after. Yanlong fired back with her own attack, but as she moved to strike, she noticed something totally unexpected. To her, it was like the guy was moving through molasses. His attack seemed painfully slow. The reality was, she had gotten so fast that her perception of time had sharpened immensely. She was processing all of this mid-fight and couldn't help but feel a rush of gratitude for becoming Ju Hyuk's student. She landed a blow so fast that the man never even saw what connected with him. The impact apparently caused his heart to burst on the spot. He was gone before his body even began to collapse. When the invaders saw their leader get taken out with a single effortless strike, that was all it took for them to scatter and run for their lives. Yanlang let the grunts flee without chasing them down. She just shouted after them that their turn was coming. She did this because with her incredible power and sharp mind, she knew the top priority was to help the injured and the other survivors. Her older sister commented that Yanlang was without a doubt the perfect person to step up as the family's new leader. She assured Yanlang that both sisters were in complete agreement and would back her all the way. Ryan simply nodded, totally on board with the idea. Ryan was thinking the exact same thing. The only real question left was whether Yanlang would actually accept the position. The girl was busy helping get the wounded out of the burning area, and once everyone was safe, she and Ryan headed to the Constellation Temple. The girl asked, "Shouldn't this be happening inside a proper room?" Ryan confirmed, "Oh, it is. We're in a room inside the mansion. This is just a special barrier to protect our family's relic." After giving a quick rundown of how the barrier was created and maintained, Ryan reached her hand directly into a pile of snow. She pulled out the box holding their sacred relic and showed it to Yanlang. It was the first time Yanlang had ever seen it, and to be honest, it just looked like a perfectly ordinary glove to her. But looks weren't everything. She figured this was her chance to get crazy strong and fast, just like Choaram. To be fair, Yanlang was seriously impressed by how much her rival powered up after making a pact with the Choi family's relic. She couldn't help but think that if she got even stronger, Ju Hyuk would totally notice her more and shower her with praise. Seeing that look on her face, Ryan knew exactly what her niece was thinking. She used the opening to ask why she was so interested in the relic. Before getting to the big question, Ryan started off with a compliment saying, "You've gotten way stronger since you began your training with Ju Hyuk. Just think," she continued, "if you became the head of the family and made a divine pact, you'd be on a whole other level." It was pretty obvious where this whole chat was going, but the suggestion still managed to catch the girl completely by surprise. She had never, not even once, considered taking charge of the family she'd looked down on for so long. "That's completely absurd," she insisted, but her aunt was very persuasive and laid out the facts. "If you just wanted a peek, then mission accomplished," she explained. "But if you want to actually make a pact, well, only the official head of the family can do that." Basically, she added, a constellation can link itself to a relic. And while a constellation can make several different pacts with hunters, it can only form one divine pact, a true connection with a single hunter. Shensen chaste boy almad. The girl, putting two and two together about the constellation's power, wondered aloud, "But isn't it a bit early for me to be the leader? I'm only 17 years old." Seriously, that woman's quick thinking was something else. Ryan argued that with the leader's position currently empty, the family was extremely vulnerable, and attacks like today's were bound to happen again. "I'm a part of this family and I care about it," she said passionately. "That's exactly why I want you, Yanlang, to be our leader. And what's more," she added, "your older sisters feel the same way. We've all put your name forward." And not just that, Ryan said, "I'm perfectly willing to handle all the boring day-to-day leadership stuff while you're still getting your bearings." As long as she was young, Ryan could help her shoulder that responsibility. The deal was simple. She would shoulder all the clan's responsibilities, and in exchange, she'd get the chance to form a way more powerful contract with their family's constellation. After weighing the pros and cons for a moment, the girl looks at her aunt and agrees to the deal. She's going to be the new head of the family, tasked with defending its honor. Her aunt says it's an honor to welcome her, adding that now all that's left is to win over the constellation. Knowing she still had to get the constellation's buy-in, she cautiously reached out and touched the relic. The instant her fingers brushed against the gauntlet, she found herself pulled into the dimension where the incredible frozen constellation resided. And there he was, the Snow King, the same one who was thoroughly defeated and humiliated by her own master, now staring right at her. So can our girl convince him to hand over all his power? Well, that smug look on his face pretty much tells you everything you need to know about his answer. Ryan was watching from a distance and could see the immense energy practically leaking out of the relic. In just a matter of seconds, she managed to have a full-on conversation with the constellation and seal a divine pact. When she came to, she shot her aunt a smile that said it all went perfectly. Her aunt looked incredibly proud, almost like she was looking at the daughter she never had. A few weeks later, the scene shifts back to the United States, where our main character is just watching everything unfold in silence. He looked pretty annoyed about this whole international competition between the magic academies. Just a few days prior, he'd been summoned to the director's office. The Black Cat had called him in right in the middle of his vacation and hadn't even bothered to say why. It was only after Joo-hyuk showed up that the director finally got around to explaining that he needed a favor. Our hero couldn't imagine what this guy could possibly need from him. Then the Black Cat reminded Joo-hyuk that classes were starting up again in just 1 week. That news alone was enough to make him feel faint, seeing as studying isn't exactly his favorite pastime. Then the director mentioned the international competition, which was also happening next week, hinting that if Joo-hyuk was paying attention, he'd have already figured out where this was going. This tournament is basically a bigger version of the old one that just had the top 3 academies only. Now it's open to every magic school in the world. Apparently, the Black Cat had only recently taken over as director and was just now finding out about this competition. The rulebook says that second and third year students aren't allowed to participate. So the Black Cat asked Joo-hyuk if he'd feel up to competing. Joo-hyuk asked if this favor was just a sneaky way of asking him to represent the academy in the tournament. To be honest, he had zero interest in doing it. Regardless, the Black Cat revealed that the event was set to take place at the Hero Academy over in the United States. Joo-hyuk remembered that place had been completely leveled not too long ago. He'd seen it happen himself, but the Black Cat just explained that they have unlimited funding and threw the whole thing back together in a few days. The director was trying to sell Joo-hyuk on the competition, pitching it as a fun little trip to the US, but Joo-hyuk couldn't have cared less about a vacation. Just as the director noticed his complete lack of interest and was about to take back the offer, Joo-hyuk unexpectedly accepted, mentioning he had some personal business to handle over there anyway. The real reason for his change of heart, his cat Barry had just remembered feeling an energy signature identical to Joo-hyuk's coming from a building in the area, so now he had a compelling reason to check things out for himself. The Black Cat then chimed in asking who Joo-hyuk planned to take as his partner for the event. Joo-hyuk didn't think he needed a partner, but the cat clarified that each academy had to send a team of 2, which made his thoughts drift to his one official disciple. Problem was Yanlong wasn't even a student at this academy, and besides, she was tied up with things in her own country. That made Choyim the obvious choice. She was just as skilled a real rival to Yanlong, but as he thought of her, a recent warning from the red-haired witch came flooding back. Just the other day, she'd suddenly yanked him into a conversation, screaming that they were in big trouble. Joo-hyuk had casually asked, hey, what would have happened if I was in the middle of a shower? A little warning next time, maybe. Plus, she was the one who said they needed to lay low for a bit, but she insisted this was too important to wait. Turns out she discovered that the red demon he recently defeated hadn't come to Earth by himself. The Lord of the Labyrinth had sent a whole crew of other big names along with him. In fact, every single name from the second floor of that ancient Tower of Destruction was now on Earth. Okay, that's definitely a problem, Joo-hyuk had said. In his past life, taking them all on would have been a walk in the park. But now it was a whole different story. The red-haired girl tried to reassure him, saying it was unlikely they'd all jump him at the same time. She figured that even though they were all here, the Lord of the Labyrinth probably gave them different missions, since mindless rampages don't really help build up a name. She just warned Joo-hyuk to watch his back and stay sharp out there. Joo-hyuk had pointed out that she should take her own advice, since she didn't exactly look like she was at 100% either. A guide needs to stay safe too, he'd added. The girl blushed a little, admitting it had been ages since anyone had shown that kind of concern for her. He took her warning to heart, promising to be careful himself before saying he'd catch her later. And that was basically the last time he spoke to a woman until he set foot in the United States. So now he gets, "What are you staring at? Teach me to sword fight." To which he responds, "Absolutely not." Aaron got all red-faced, explaining that an academy rep told her Joo-hyuk personally requested that she come with him. So naturally, she's incredibly grateful and promises to work hard to live up to his expectations, which is awkward since Joo-hyuk can't really tell her she was his backup plan. He just plays it cool and says he's counting on her. Nearby, a couple of familiar, handsome faces pop into view. It's Logan, the same guy Joo-hyuk bailed out during the last school tournament. He'd been a nervous wreck, wondering if he'd have to go up against our protagonist in the matches. Well, it looks like he just found out that he most certainly will. He states for a fact that Joo-hyuk is the odds-on favorite to win the whole thing. Besides, he and his friend both feel like they owe the guy. Melissa adds that she's so thankful to Joo-hyuk for saving all of them before. They're both fully aware they're totally outmatched, so they're hoping to use this tournament as a chance to thank him properly and ask how in the world he got so strong. Just then, the head of the American Academy steps forward, drawing everyone's attention. He introduces himself as Becky, the president of the Hero Academy, and says it's a pleasure to have them all here for the international competition. He brings up the fact that they must have heard about the recent attack at the academy and are probably a little on edge. He reassures them that the culprit has been dealt with, the campus is fully repaired, and they've cranked security up to the max to ensure the event runs smoothly. The director pretty much tells everyone to just relax because nothing's going to go wrong. Our main character, meanwhile, is just taking it all in, lost in thought. He's finally paying attention to the details of the competition, which is set to last for 2 days and 1 night. The very first event on the list is to navigate a labyrinth within a specific time limit. But while all these explanations are happening, someone is watching from the security room Logan's father, who is determined to uncover the secret behind Joo-hyuk. As he's anxiously keeping an eye on our hero, a voice calls his name and a woman named Lana from the Contractors Association appears. It turns out they're old friends, so Logan's dad asks her what she's doing at the academy. She fills him in, explaining that her company was hired to manage security and she's here overseeing the job. She teases that he should remember her line of work, especially after how much she pestered him about going into the private sector himself. Logan's dad gets it, then admits he's only here because a certain participant has been seriously bugging him. Lana immediately asks if he means his son Logan, but he clarifies that the one he's focused on is Kim Joo-hyuk. Right before he can finish the name, a violent tremor shakes the room, grabbing their attention. Being the security professional she is, Lana immediately sprints off to see what's going on. It only took a moment for them to reach a window, but when they looked outside, the view was absolutely shocking. Hundreds of monsters had just appeared out of thin air, and the sky had turned a blood-red color. These grotesque creatures, practically glowing with malice, were already on the prowl. As they stared in disbelief, trying to process what was happening, Lana's radio crackled to life. She immediately gets on and chews out her subordinates, asking why they didn't warn her about the approaching danger. It turns out her agents were already aware of the problem. The issue, however, was that the monsters hadn't approached from anywhere. They had literally just burst up from the ground. This was a completely unforeseen event that wasn't covered in any of their emergency protocols. She instantly decides on a course of action, giving Logan's dad a look that says she's going down there to crush those zombies and secure the area. This woman is seriously tough. She vaults right out of the building lands in front of the horde and basically dares them to fight her, ready to wipe them out. The zombies, for their part, were completely screwed. She unleashed a flurry of strikes so unbelievably fast that the damage registered before you could even see her move. She was felling multiple monsters with a single attack. She yelled to her team that these things had paper-thin defenses and that they shouldn't hold back. But even though they were easy to kill, there were just so many of them. An amount this large was not normal at all. She starts to wonder if a dungeon gate opened up somewhere nearby. "Did anyone see a gate open in the area?" she radios. "Negative, ma'am." Nothing was detected. "That's impossible," she thinks, gritting her teeth and trying to make sense of the situation. I should probably mention that her eyes are gorgeous. Anyway, the woman reasons that if the monsters came from below, there must be some hidden catastrophe brewing right under their feet. The academy was in grave danger. While she was busy taking on the horde outside, she had no clue that dozens of zombies had already managed to get inside the building. Despite the widespread panic, our main characters look perfectly calm, probably just wondering who these new cannon fodder characters are lining up to die again. A campus-wide announcement crackles on, informing everyone that the competition has been canceled and that all students must evacuate. Beck is yelling at the top of his lungs for everyone to get out and not to even think about fighting the monsters, reminding them that's not what students are for. This was a complete disaster. He'd already lost everything once when the academy was destroyed. Now history was repeating itself and ruining all his hard work. He had to be wondering if the universe was personally trying to tank his reputation. One of the security staff runs over to the academy president and insists that he needs to get to safety as well. Someone told Beck to get to safety with the other students, but he flat out refused, just too frustrated to run. He rolled up his sleeves announcing he was joining the fight and swore he wasn't going to let something like this happen ever again. With a sharp crack of his knuckles, he powered up erupting in green energy, then charged a zombie and unleashed a massive punch that sent a whole group of them soaring. Through it all, Joo-hyuk just watched, calmly observing the chaos unfold. A flicker of recognition crossed his mind. He'd seen these monsters before. At the same time, Choi decided to ignore the evacuation order and jump into the fight. With her hand on her sword's hilt, she drew her blade and carved a path right through the horde in front of her. After taking down yet another wave of monsters, aim paused. She'd already defeated a ridiculous number, but there seemed to be no end to their reinforcements. She turned to the protagonist, clearly looking for a plan. Joo-hyuk told her to save her energy because wasting it on these grunts was pointless. They were dealing with an infinite supply. Which means our best bet is this. He slammed his sword into the pavement and a golden light pulsed outwards in every direction. The monsters all stopped in their tracks, looking completely bewildered by the sudden flash of light. It's not like those things could think anyway. Then they just started to melt into puddles. Honestly, their brains were probably goo to begin with. It was Joo-hyuk's mere presence that was causing the zombies to liquefy, an effect borrowed from one of his disciples' unique abilities. He smirked to himself. That knucklehead disciple of his really came up with a handy skill for handling large groups. Elsewhere, the director was in the thick of it, fighting with everything he had when he looked up and realized the creatures around him were just dissolving. He knew for a fact it wasn't him, so what on earth was happening? He frantically looked around, searching for the source. Then he spotted Joo-hyuk, and the answer was obvious. Who else but that monster of a kid could pull something like this off? He'd saved his hide once more. Joo-hyuk called out to his companions, letting them know this was just a temporary fix, and that they should conserve their energy for now. When Aram asked him what the plan was, Joo-hyuk replied with a confident smirk that he was about to go find the person responsible for this mess. Unseen by the heroes, a hidden figure was watching the entire battle. This shady character was watching the fight through a set of puppets, but as his pieces were taken off the board, he knew something wasn't right. The masked figure watched in disbelief as his zombies were being wiped out in a way that should have been impossible. He had more than enough resources to keep them coming, yet, for some reason, they weren't regenerating. He began to wonder if a powerful contractor was on site, because against an army this large, not even the strongest fighter out there should be able to halt their regeneration. The moment he saw the guy, the monster's mind started racing with possibilities. Taking this hero out would be a one-way ticket to fame and glory, making him look like a total boss. But right in the middle of his villainous daydreaming, someone came crashing straight through his ceiling, sending debris everywhere. Our hero made his grand entrance, casually smashing through the roof like it was just another Tuesday. The demon, however, looked absolutely horrified. You could practically see the terror in his eyes. Why was this impossibly powerful dude here for him, of all people? The protagonist landed with the impact of a small comet. The masked demon was so baffled, he couldn't even react standing there, with his jaw on the floor right before catching a fist square in the chest that sent him flying back several meters. With no time to even process what just happened, the creature slammed its hands on the ground and desperately summoned every last zombie it could muster. Joo-hyuk, with a smirk on his face, gave his sword a lazy little swing. Instantly, the entire zombie horde vanished into dust. The monster just stared, completely unable to wrap its head around what was happening. This couldn't be real. Then the protagonist raised his sword again, not pointing it at the monster, but instead aiming for where the puppet strings would be. As the monster scrambled away, in fear, the protagonist flashed a grin and said, "Hey, nice dodge there, Watcha. Glad you're paying attention." The monster froze in sheer terror when it heard that name. How in the world could this human possibly know his true identity? And in that single terrifying moment, everything clicked into place. The horrified creature knew that a presence and an attack like that could only belong to one being the god of war. Joo-hyuk's little smile confirmed his guess was spot on. Moving in a blur, he slashed directly at the monster's face. The creature tried to parry with its hand, but the attack was just too powerful to stop. Its hand was completely shredded. The creature wanted to scream, but it was all happening too fast to even react. It never in a million years imagined it would run into the very person who had defeated it in its past life. Ju-hyuk, meanwhile, was clearly enjoying this little reunion. He readied his next attack, his grin now looking way more menacing than any face the demon could ever make. The blade slammed into the monster's shoulder, and a split second later, the entire arm was sliced clean off. It was almost funny watching the demon squirm and hyperventilate in pure panic. You'd never guess this was the same creature that had been confidently terrorizing humans on the surface with its puppets just a little while ago. Now that he had the demon cornered, the protagonist cheerfully mentioned that he could do this all day. If the demon really wanted to be sliced into a million little pieces, Ju-hyuk was more than happy to oblige. It wouldn't be long before he ended up just like that red demon. The masked figure wondered aloud if the god of war was the reason Hong-wei had vanished. With a calm demeanor, the hero admitted the demon had hit the nail on the head, even complimenting its intelligence. That last remark clearly pushed a button because the creature furiously summoned one of its heavy-hitter monsters to charge. The thing was absolutely massive, but Juke just stood there completely unfazed. "Hey, we just came to this planet to follow our instructions," the masked one explained. Offing the ex-god of war wasn't on the to-do list, so this whole scrap is pointless. Despite saying that it sent its puppet lunging forward an attack, Juke effortlessly sidestepped. Juke's magic relic flared to life. "You really think trying to fight me is a waste of time?" he asked. With a seemingly casual swing, his blade was suddenly engulfed in a ghostly green glow. It dawned on the masked demon Juke was wielding the powers of several constellations simultaneously. The impact of that last hit made the demon's body start to dissolve, and it collapsed right into the nasty slime puddle of its own defeated zombie. The demon didn't even have a moment to process. It just stared at its liquefied monster, trying to wrap its head around what just went down. Probably not the best time to be daydreaming. Juke chimed in with a grin, already making his next move. The blow landed squarely on the creature's neck, lopping its head clean off. Even while detached, the head was still yapping, boasting that the god of war wasn't the powerhouse he used to be. If the comment was supposed to get under his skin, it completely failed. He just casually remarked that the monster was just as hard to kill as ever. The puppet demon shot back that no matter how many times it was beaten, its name would endure. It swore it would return one day right alongside the very first red demon Juke had ever slain. "Ah, so that's why you said this was all pointless earlier," Juke mused. "You figured you'd just get reborn, didn't you?" Then, with a truly sinister look, the hero asked, "And you actually believe that Red Demon is going to make a comeback?" "Sorry to disappoint, but that's not happening. Not for him and not for any of the others. You see, you're all trapped in this ring now." All of their precious weapons had been converted into pure energy for Juke to wield. It suddenly clicked for the creature the hero could actually absorb the names of the villains who came after him. Juke explained that it was really just a copycat version of the absorption skill used by the Lord of the Labyrinth, but that detail was hardly important. The real takeaway was that none of them would ever be coming back to cause trouble. The head lying on the ground was now gripped by absolute horror. As the reality of its permanent demise set in, the hero began to siphon its energy, all while the disembodied head screamed for him to stop. But as luck would have it for the villain, a monster's pleas tend to fall on deaf ears. Within moments, every bit of its energy had been sucked dry and sealed within the ring. Juke felt a deep sense of satisfaction knowing another one of those creeps got the ending they so richly deserved. Although the fight was completely clandestine, two of the protagonist's loyal followers were watching the whole show unfold, all thanks to a special relic he owned. The Black Cat turned to Adelia and asked for her take on the battle they just watched. Since it was the first time the girl had ever seen Juke truly let loose, she was just stunned by how amazing he was. So amazing, in fact, that it left her feeling a little flustered. Picking up on her reaction, the Black Cat playfully asked which part she enjoyed the most. She smiled, telling the cat to just call her Adelia, keeping the mood light and friendly. "Did you catch how he perfectly executed our constellations technique?" she asked. "I'm talking about the ultimate secret, the one skill from each constellation that you never ever show anyone." Of course, being allies, we all decided to share our secrets with one another. What Adelia couldn't wrap her head around was how he could use her constellation's ultimate skill when she, the actual owner of its relic, wasn't able to. She then started to break down the mechanics of the poison he'd just deployed. "It's the secret ace up our sleeve," she said. "It converts magical energy directly into a poison that just dissolves an opponent's body." The cat, looking curious, asked what would happen if a contractor with just an average skill level tried to pull off that move. "Well, for it to work," she explained, "you have to make direct physical contact with the creature to kickstart the melting. Heck, even and I'm well above average, with a direct line to the constellation, would need to touch an opponent's internal organs for it to take full effect. but Juke was making them melt without even laying a finger on them. Adelia was trying to emphasize that pulling off something like that requires a completely insane level of skill. That kind of application wasn't even theoretically possible, which left them both even more impressed by the hero's capabilities. She then recalled that he only had a temporary pact with her constellation, which should have only granted him access to a fraction of its power. And yet, he was able to do so much more than her even with her superior contract. After her amazement subsided a bit, she confessed that she was genuinely blown away by him. It was her first time witnessing him fight other monsters, and now she was completely convinced that he was on another level. The moment she finished her thought, the constellation itself spoke to her, stating that it was to be expected. The constellation clarified that, while the poison was its own unique ability, a true master had been the one to help it hone that skill. And when it comes to practical use, it admitted, Juke is actually more skilled with my own power than I am. Adelia was still trying to process the fact that this young man had trained a constellation she had admired her whole life. She had to admit her constellation had a point. Adelia turned to the black cat and mentioned that when the protagonist got back, she had a huge favor to ask him. She was hoping he would train her too. As the two got excited about the prospect, the story jumps back to the United States. The invasion site was a complete catastrophe, with wreckage and destruction everywhere from the creatures that had been summoned. All the security personnel could manage was to fight off the creatures as they showed up, since no one had a clue where they were spawning from. The commander sent her team to sweep for anyone injured or taking cover, but the whole incident still nagged at her. She refused to believe it all just happened for no reason. Model. Putting the pieces together, she replayed Logan's words in her head, wondering if the protagonist was somehow behind the zombie disappearances. At that very moment, she was locked in combat with another wave of creatures. She was giving it her all, but her energy was flagging fast. The horde was endless, and even though she was the strongest fighter there, she knew she couldn't keep this up forever. They just kept on coming one after another. As she was desperately trying to come up with a plan to stop the source, she spotted him. The protagonist was standing right in front of the zombie mob. He had one hand casually in his pocket. She wasn't sure if she'd been too distracted to notice him arrive or if he'd literally just appeared out of thin air. Her immediate reaction was to scream at him to run for his life. But then he shot her a reassuring smile that caught her completely off guard. That crazy student slammed his sword into the ground, and a wave of green energy pulsed outwards, causing all the nearby creatures to just melt into puddles. That power, that incredible aura, she just couldn't comprehend it. It had effortlessly vaporized the same monster she couldn't even scratch. It was absolutely absurd. She didn't get a clear look, but she knew in her gut that it had to be Ju Hyuk. The protagonist had saved the day, but she couldn't shake the nagging feeling that the monsters had only started attacking right when he arrived on the scene. She was lost in thought when Logan jogged over, calling out to her and asking if she was all right. He also needed to know if the situation inside the academy was under control. Logan quickly updated her that all the students were safe and that Beck was handling the cleanup. Seeing her chance, the girl decided to ask about the student Logan had been so interested in. "That person you were talking about, Ju Hyuk, weren't you?" she asked. He looked taken aback since he was sure he hadn't mentioned a name. "How did you know?" To Logan's shock, she explained, "Because Ju Hyuk was the one who just took care of that entire zombie army. He just walked straight into that horde by himself, planted his sword in the ground, and they all just dissolved." Logan grew quiet, thinking hard. Everything he knew said that Ju Hyuk had a contract with the Lord of the Underworld, and that constellation definitely didn't have any powers like that. Right before he said another word, he remembered the Black Cat's strict advice, keep the constellation's special abilities under wraps,